Chapter 1. The Hybrid's Curse. Kseron stood on the edge of the desolate city of Kseron, his sharp gaze piercing through the dense mist that enveloped the ruins. The night was quiet, unnaturally so. The remnants of ancient structures lay scattered like skeletal remains, some half-submerged in the ever-present fog, others jutting out like broken teeth toward the sky. The air carried the weight of many battles fought and lost here. Kseron was no ordinary place. It was the birthplace of the Syllax, a powerful alien race known for their ability to manipulate gravitational fields and control the very fabric of reality. Kseron was not fully human, nor was he entirely Syllax. He was a hybrid, cursed by his own blood. Since birth, Kseron had been trapped between two worlds. His father, a human, had been a legendary warrior, fighting in the name of freedom for Earth and its colonies. His mother, however, was Syllax, a race bound by ambition, driven to dominate the galaxy through fear and subjugation. Kseron's mixed heritage had made him a weapon, capable of harnessing both the strength of humans and the reality-bending powers of the Syllax. But it had also made him a target. The Syllax feared hybrids like him. They represented a bridge between two opposing forces, and that terrified them more than anything else. Kseron had spent most of his life hunted, never fully belonging to either side. Tonight, though, he had a singular goal: vengeance. Kseron was once the capital of the Syllax Empire, now abandoned after the last Great War. But deep within its ruins, Kseron knew there was still life, or at least something akin to it. The Syllax leader, Ixallia, remained. She was the one who had ordered the death of his mother, the one who sought to exterminate all hybrids like him. Tonight, he would end her reign. He tightened his grip on the hilt of his blade. The weapon was unique, forged from a rare material capable of cutting through the gravitational fields that the Syllax used to shield themselves. It pulsed softly in the misty darkness, reflecting Kseron's resolve. The silence was broken by a low hum, a vibration that Kseron knew all too well. The Syllax were near. He could sense the distortion in the air, the subtle warping of gravity as they prepared to ambush. Without turning his head, he whispered into the comm device embedded in his armor, "Renee, I'm close." A moment of static followed. Then Renete's voice crackled through. "Be careful. The Syllax don't play fair. If you get caught in their trap—" "I won't," Kseron interrupted, eyes narrowing. "They'll have to do better than that." Chapter 2. Betrayal Revealed. The energy cube ahead flickered, its once stable gravitational field now pulsating erratically. Kseron moved cautiously, every sense alert. The structure had once served as the core of the Syllax's power grid, but now it was just another broken monument to their former glory. Renate was waiting for him, leaning against one of the rusted pillars near the cube's perimeter. The human was an old ally, though lately Kseron had grown wary of him. There was something about Rene's recent behavior that didn't sit right, and Kseron couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Glad you made it," Rene greeted, his tone casual, but his eyes darted nervously as if he expected trouble. "I thought you might have run into some Syllax on your way here." "I did," Kseron replied coldly, "but that's not what's bothering me." Renette raised an eyebrow. "Oh? What is?" Kseron didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, his gaze piercing into Renete's, searching for any hint of deception. "You've been different lately, Rene. Less committed." Rene shifted uncomfortably. "What are you talking about? I'm still with you." "Are you?" Kseron's voice was low but sharp. "Or have you found another side to play for?" Renete's expression darkened, and Kseron's suspicions were confirmed in that instant. The sound of footsteps echoed around them, and from the mist emerged several figures, armed mercenaries, all bearing the insignia of Syllax sympathizers. René shrugged, a forced smile on his face. You know how it is, Kseron. Loyalty's expensive, and the Syllax, well, they pay better. Kseron's hand instinctively went to his sword, the blade humming with energy. You've made a mistake. René's smile faltered. No, Kseron. It's you who made the mistake, thinking you could take on the Syllax alone. The mercenaries moved forward, their weapons ready. Kseron didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he drew his blade, and in a flash of light, the first wave of attackers fell before they could even reach him. René backed away, eyes wide with fear. Wait! Kseron! This isn't… But Kseron wasn't listening. His focus was now on the battle, the mercenaries falling one after another as his blade sliced through their ranks. René was already running, disappearing into the mist. Chapter 3. The chase Kseron tore through the fog, his boots barely touching the ground as he pursued René. The mercenaries were no match for him, their bodies scattered in the wake of his deadly strikes. But René was a different matter. Betrayal always fueled Kseron's rage in a way few things could. Ahead, René was fast, dodging between the jagged remains of Craxus's ancient structures, but Kseron was faster. He closed the distance with every step, his sword still crackling with energy from the earlier fight. Just as Kseron reached out, ready to grab René by the collar, the ground beneath him shifted. A sudden gravitational distortion sent him tumbling to the side, narrowly avoiding a trap. René had led him into an ambush. Out of the mist, more Syllax sympathizers appeared, their weapons aimed at Kseron. But this time, they weren't just human. Several were hybrids like him, failed experiments of the Syllax, twisted versions of what Kseron was meant to be. Kseron! René called from a safe distance. You can't win! These hybrids, they're stronger than you, faster. Just give up. Kseron glared at him. You've been playing with fire, René. Now watch it burn you. The hybrids charged at Kseron, their movements swift and unnatural. But Kseron was prepared. His sword met theirs in a violent clash of sparks and energy. Each strike sent shock waves through the air, distorting the fog and scattering debris. The hybrids were powerful, but they lacked control, their attacks wild and uncoordinated. One by one they fell, their bodies collapsing under the weight of their own recklessness. Kseron stood over them, breathing heavily, his sword dripping with their blood. René was nowhere to be seen. Chapter 4. The Labyrinth of Shadows. After the battle, Kseron found himself deep in the heart of Craxus' forgotten labyrinth. The air was thick with dust and the echoes of the past. Ancient Syllax symbols adorned the walls, glowing faintly as he passed, like silent witnesses to his journey. The deeper he went, the more distorted reality became. The Syllax had mastered the art of warping space, and their ancient traps still lingered, twisting the very fabric of the labyrinth. Shadows moved unnaturally, seeming to shift and dance even when Kseron stood still. He could feel her presence now. Ixallia. She was close. "Come to me, Kseron," a voice whispered from the darkness. It was soft, yet filled with malice. "Your destiny awaits." Kseron's grip tightened on his sword. He would face her, and this time he wouldn't let the shadows deceive him. Chapter 5. Dance of Death. Ixallia stood at the center of the hall, her presence like a storm, her power pulling at the very air around her. Her eyes, glowing violet, fixed on Kseron as he entered the room. The gravitational fields warped and twisted around her, distorting the space, making it seem as though reality itself was bending to her will. "You've come for me, Kseron," she said, her voice cold and calculating. He said nothing, drawing his sword. He was done with words. With a flick of her wrist, Ixallia sent a wave of gravitational force towards him. The very ground beneath Kseron's feet rippled as though it had turned to liquid. But he was ready. Using his sword's unique properties, he cut through the gravitational field, his body surging forward. Ixallia smiled. "You're strong, hybrid. But strength isn't enough." She raised her arms, and the hall began to collapse. Pieces of stone and metal lifted into the air, floating as if weightless, only to be hurled at Kseron with deadly force. He dodged and weaved, deflecting the projectiles with his sword, but it was clear that Ixallia's control over the environment was nearly absolute. Kseron needed to get close. He needed to finish this. With a burst of energy, he launched himself forward, his sword cutting through the debris. Ixallia's smile faltered for a brief moment as he closed the distance between them. Their blades met in a clash of power, sparks flying as their energies collided. The fight was a blur of motion, Kseron's speed and precision against Ixallia's overwhelming power. Each strike sent shockwaves through the air, warping the space around them. For a moment, it seemed as though neither would gain the upper hand. But Kseron had something Ixallia didn't: resolve. With a final, powerful strike, Kseron broke through her defenses. His sword pierced through her armor, and Ixallia gasped, her eyes widening in shock. She stumbled back, her powers fading as the gravitational fields around them began to collapse. Kseron stood over her, his breath heavy, his sword still glowing with energy. "It's over," he said. Ixallia's eyes flickered, and she whispered, "It's never over. Not for you." With that, she collapsed, the life leaving her body. The room fell silent, the storm of energy dissipating into nothing. Chapter 6. Memories of the Past. As the dust settled, Kseron was left alone in the ruins. His thoughts drifted back to his parents, to the memories he had tried to bury for so long. His father, a warrior like him, standing tall with his sword in hand, ready to fight for humanity. His mother, the Syllax, with her soft eyes, her hands glowing with the same energy that Kseron now wielded. They had both died because of what he was: a hybrid. Neither side had wanted him, but both had feared him. And now, with Ixallia dead, the weight of that burden seemed heavier than ever. But as Kseron looked out over the ruins of Craxus, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer running from his past. He had faced it, and he had won. Chapter 7. Aftermath. Kseron stood amidst the ruins of Craxus, his sword still humming faintly with energy. The mist had begun to clear, and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the destroyed city. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that came after a storm had passed. The bodies of his enemies lay scattered around him, and at his feet, Ixallia's lifeless form. He had won, but at what cost? The weight of his victory felt hollow, burdened by the ghosts of his past and the uncertainty of his future. Kseron sheathed his sword, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He was free now, free from the curse of his hybrid blood, free from the enemies who sought to destroy him. But that freedom came with a price: a life lived in the shadows, with no clear path ahead. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Kseron turned his back on the ruins and walked away. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready to face whatever came next.